The message traveled through space for 6 days before anyone heard it. It moved at the speed of light, a tiny whisper in the vast darkness between stars. The signal was weak and simple, sent by creatures who had never spoken to anyone beyond their own world. They did not know if anyone would hear them. They did not know if anyone would care. On the edge of the Orion Arm, far from Earth and far from anything humans considered important, a small survey vessel drifted through the void. The ship was called the Wandering Star, and it had spent 11 years mapping dead planets and empty systems. Its crew of 42 had grown used to silence. Commander Daniel Hayes sat in his chair on the bridge, reading a report about mineral deposits on a frozen moon. He was 53 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had joined the Survey Corps when he was young because he wanted adventure. Now he just wanted to finish his tour and go home to see his grandchildren. The communications panel beeped. Hayes looked up. Lieutenant Megan Price, his science officer, was already moving toward the console. She was 30 years younger than Hayes, eager and sharp, still excited by the work that had become routine to everyone else. "Sir," she said, her voice careful, "we're receiving a transmission. From command?" "No, sir." It's not human." Hayes set down his report. In 30 years of service, he had never heard those words. Humanity had found traces of alien life before fossils, ruins, the remains of civilizations long dead. But they had never found anyone still alive. They had never found anyone who could send a message. He walked to the console and looked at the data streaming across the screen. The signal was weak but clear. It repeated every 4 minutes, the same pattern of sounds and symbols over and over again. "Can you translate it?" he asked. "The computer is working on it," Price said. "The language structure is simple. Give it a few minutes." Hayes waited. Around him, the bridge crew had stopped their work. Everyone was watching, everyone was listening. They all understood what this meant. After 200 years of searching, humanity was no longer alone. The computer finished its analysis. The translation appeared on the screen, and Hayes read it slowly. "This is the Belfry of the third world of the Kessa system. We face a danger we cannot stop. A cluster of asteroids will strike our agricultural moon in 18 cycles, our sun. We do not have the tools to move them or break them apart. We ask anyone who hears this message for help. We can offer trade, friendship, and gratitude. Please, we do not want to watch our children starve." The bridge was silent. Hayes read the message again. Then he turned to Price. "Can you confirm the threat?" She was already working, her fingers moving across her console, scanning the coordinates they provided. "Yes, sir. I see the asteroid cluster. Based on their trajectory and the orbital mechanics, they're right. Impact in approximately 18 months, Earth time. How bad? The moon they're talking about appears to be their main food source. If those asteroids hit, they'll lose about 60% of their agricultural capacity. For a civilization their size." She paused. "It would be catastrophic. Millions would die." Hayes thought about his grandchildren. He thought about what it would feel like to watch them go hungry, knowing he couldn't stop it. "Send a reply," he said. "Tell them help is coming." Price looked at him. "Sir, shouldn't we contact command first?" "There are protocols for this situation. The protocols say we respond to distress signals immediately. That's what this is." Hayes sat back down in his chair. "Send the reply. Then contact Earth and tell them what we've found." The reply went out into the darkness. It was simple and short. Message received. Assistance will be provided. Do not lose hope. 6 days later, the Belfry received it. Ambassador Kelleth, the leader of their diplomatic council, wept when he heard the words. His species had debated for months about whether to send the signal. Many had argued it was pointless, that no one was listening, that no one would care about the problems of a small civilization on the edge of nowhere. But someone had answered. Caliph gathered his council and shared the news. The relief in the room was overwhelming. Elders who had not smiled in years embraced each other. Young ones who had grown up under the shadow of coming disaster allowed themselves to hope for the first time. "They are coming to help us," Caliph announced. "We must prepare to receive them." The preparations began. The Velthri cleared a landing area near their capital city. They gathered their finest craftsmen to create gifts for their rescuers. They debated what food to serve, what music to play, what words to say. None of them had ever met an alien before. They had no idea what to expect. Back on Earth, the news of first contact spread through the government like fire. Emergency meetings were held. Generals and admirals gathered in secure rooms to discuss the situation. Scientists argued about the implications. Politicians worried about the risks. And somewhere in that chaos, a decision was made. Humanity had waited 200 years for this moment. 200 years of searching, hoping, wondering if they were alone. Now, they had found someone who needed help, someone who had reached out in desperation. This was humanity's chance to make a first impression, to show the galaxy what they were capable of. The orders went out to every major fleet in the sector. Ships were recalled from patrol. Crews were assembled. Supplies were loaded. Commander Hayes, still aboard his little survey vessel, watched the military channels with growing confusion. He had expected Earth to send a mining ship, maybe two. Something with the equipment to break apart asteroids or push them off course. A simple solution to a simple problem. Instead, he saw the fleet manifests rolling across his screen. Battle cruisers, carriers, destroyers, dreadnoughts, more firepower than had been assembled in one place since the colonial wars. He turned to Lieutenant Price. "What are they doing?" She shook her head slowly. I think they're sending everyone, sir." Hayes looked back at the screen. He thought about the Velthri, waiting on their small world with their handmade gifts and their simple hopes. They had asked for a hammer. They were about to receive something else entirely. Ambassador Kelleth stood in the observation tower of the capital city, watching the sky. The humans had sent word that their ships would arrive today. He had prepared everything. The landing area was clean, the gifts were wrapped, the welcome speech was memorized. His hands trembled slightly with excitement. Around him, thousands of Velthri had gathered in the streets below. They had come from villages and towns across the continent, all wanting to witness the historic moment. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Elders leaned on walking sticks. Everyone looked up at the clouds, waiting. The sensor technician in the tower spoke first. "Ambassador, I'm detecting something." "The human ship?" "Yes, well." The technician paused. His voice became uncertain. "Ambassador, there seems to be a problem with our sensors." Kelleth turned to look at him. "What kind of problem?" "They're showing multiple contacts." "Many multiple contacts. But that can't be right." The technician adjusted his instruments. "Our equipment must be malfunctioning." Kelleth walked to the sensor console and looked at the display. He saw dots appearing on the screen. First 1, then 5, then 20, then too many to count. They were spreading across the sensor field like drops of rain on still water. "How many?" he whispered. The technician ran the numbers 3 times before he answered. 147 vessels, Ambassador. And they're enormous. The smallest one is larger than our entire capital city. Kelleth felt his legs grow weak. He gripped the edge of the console to steady himself. Far above the planet, the human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Admiral Patricia Cole stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Inevitable Dawn, watching the alien world appear on her view screen. She was 61 years old, with iron gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen 3 wars. She had commanded fleets, won battles, and buried friends. Nothing surprised her anymore. "Status report," she said. Captain Gregory Lame stepped forward with a tablet in his hand. "All ships have arrived safely, Admiral. The fleet is holding position at the designated coordinates. Engineering teams are standing by to begin asteroid assessment." Good. Cole studied the planet below. It was blue and green, smaller than Earth, but beautiful in its own way. "Have we established communication with the locals?" "Attempting now, Admiral." On the planet's surface, Kelleth finally found his voice. "Open a channel," he said. "I need to speak with them." The communication link crackled to life. Kelleth saw a human face appear on his screen. Woman with hard features and a formal uniform covered in symbols he didn't understand. Behind her, he could see a bridge filled with screens and controls and people moving with purpose. "This is Admiral Patricia Cole of the Earth Defense Fleet," the woman said. "We received your distress signal and have arrived to provide assistance." Kelleth tried to speak, but his translator struggled with the human language. He took a breath and composed himself. "Admiral Cole, I am Ambassador Kelleth of the Velthri people. We are grateful for your response." "Of course. Now, if you can provide us with the exact coordinates of the asteroid cluster, we'll begin operations immediately." "Admiral." Kelleth hesitated. "Forgive me, but I must ask. How many ships have you brought?" Cole glanced at her tactical officer. 147 vessels. 3 carrier groups, 2 battlecruiser squadrons, a full engineering division, and support craft. "I see." Kelleth's voice was very quiet. "And these vessels, what is their purpose?" "Their function?" Cole frowned slightly. "They're warships, Ambassador. Combat vessels. I assumed you'd want the best we had available." The word did not translate properly. Kelleth's device rendered it as conflict vessels, which meant nothing to him. "I apologize, Admiral. My translator is having difficulty. What is a warship?" There was a pause on the human end of the communication. Cole exchanged looks with her officers. When she spoke again, her voice was more careful. "A warship is a vessel designed for battle, for fighting enemies, for protection." Kelleth felt a cold sensation spreading through his body. "Fighting," he repeated. "You mean harming others? With those ships?" "Yes, Ambassador, if necessary." "And you have brought 147 of these fighting ships to our world?" "Yes. Is there a problem?" Kelleth turned away from the screen. He looked at the sensor display, where the human fleet hung in orbit like a cloud of metal and fire. Each of those ships was designed to harm. Each one carried weapons, tools made specifically for ending lives. The Velthri had no such things. They had never needed them. The concept of organized violence was as foreign to them as breathing underwater. He turned back to the screen. "Admiral Cole, I must ask you directly. Have we done something wrong? Have we offended your people in some way?" Cole's frown deepened. "No, Ambassador. We're here to help you. Then why have you brought weapons?" "Because—" Cole stopped. She looked genuinely confused. "Because that's what we do. When someone asks for help, we come prepared for anything. But we ask for help with rocks," Kelleth said. "Asteroids. We need someone to move them or break them. We thought perhaps you would have mining equipment or explosives for construction. We did not expect—" He gestured helplessly at the sensor display. "We did not expect this." In the streets below the tower, the Velthri were beginning to panic. Word had spread about the fleet above them. Parents were gathering their children, pulling them indoors. Elders were praying to gods they hadn't spoken to in years. The welcome celebration had turned into something else entirely. Admiral Cole was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to Lieutenant Chris Dunn, her communications officer. "Get me the original distress signal. The full recording." Dunn found the file and played it. Cole listened to the Velthry's plea, their simple request for someone with the tools to stop the asteroids. She heard the fear in their voice, the desperate hope. And she understood, finally, what had happened. They had asked for a hammer. And humanity, being humanity, had sent an army. Cole sat down in her command chair. For the first time in decades, she didn't know what to say. She had commanded fleets against pirates, rebels, and hostile powers. She had never commanded a fleet that frightened the people it was trying to save. "Ambassador Kelleth," she said finally, "I believe there has been a misunderstanding. A serious one. I would like to send someone to your surface to explain, to help you understand what we are and why we came. Would you allow that?" Kelleth looked at the sky, where the fleet waited in silence. He thought about the weapons pointed at his world, the power to destroy everything he loved hovering just beyond the clouds. "Yes," he said quietly. "I think we need to understand." Part 3. Cultural Collision. The shuttle descended through the clouds like a metal seed falling from a great tree. Dr. Nina Soto watched the alien world grow larger through her window, her heart beating fast. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, the chance to meet another intelligent species, to learn how they thought and felt and lived. But the circumstances were not what she had imagined. She was not here to celebrate. She was here to explain. The shuttle landed on the clearing the Velthry had prepared. Dr. Soto stepped out into alien air that smelled like copper and flowers. Before her stood Ambassador Kelleth and a small group of officials, their insectoid bodies tense with fear. They had large, multifaceted eyes that reflected the light in strange ways. Their limbs were thin and delicate. They looked like creatures who had never needed to be strong. "Ambassador Kelleth," Soto said, bowing slightly. "Thank you for allowing me to come, Dr. Soto." Kelleth's voice was cautious. "You are the one they sent to explain?" "Yes. I studied different species, how they think, how they developed, why they do the things they do. Admiral Cole thought I might be able to help you understand us better." Kelleth gestured toward the capital city. "Then please, come. We have many questions." They walked together through streets that were nearly empty. The Velthry had retreated into their homes, watching from windows and doorways. Children stared at Soto with wide eyes before their parents pulled them back. The fear was everywhere, thick as fog. Kelleth led her to a meeting hall where the High Council had gathered. A dozen elders sat in a circle, their ancient eyes studying the human with a mixture of curiosity and terror. Elder Varth, the oldest among them, spoke first. "We've never seen a weapon," he said. "Not in our entire history. The word exists in our old texts, but only as a curiosity, something that violent species in stories used to hurt each other. We thought such things were myths." Soto sat down on the floor to bring herself to their level. "I understand. Your world developed differently than ours." "How differently?" Kelleth asked. "What happened to your people that made you create such things?" Soto took a deep breath. This was the hard part, explaining human history to creatures who had no framework for violence. It was like explaining color to someone who had been blind from birth. "Our world was not kind to us," she began. "When humans first appeared, we were small and weak. Everything around us wanted to kill us, animals with teeth and claws, sickness in the water, poison in the plants. The weather tried to freeze us. The sun tried to burn us. Even other humans fought us for food and shelter." The council members leaned forward, listening intently. "We survived because we learned to fight back. We made tools first to hunt animals, then to defend ourselves against other groups. As our societies grew larger, our conflicts grew larger too. We fought wars over land, over resources, over beliefs. Millions died. Cities burned. Entire civilizations were destroyed. Why? Elder Vorath asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why would you do such things to each other? Because we were afraid, Soto said simply. We were always afraid. The universe had taught us that danger was everywhere, that safety was an illusion, that the only way to survive was to be stronger than whatever wanted to hurt us. She paused, gathering her thoughts. When we finally reached the stars, we expected to find the same thing we had always found: enemies, threats, dangers. We built our fleets to protect ourselves from whatever was out there. And when we received your message, asking for help, she spread her hands. We responded the only way we knew how. We sent everything we had. Calith stood and walked to a window. Outside, the sky was clear, but he knew the human fleet was still there, waiting just beyond sight. You expected us to be dangerous. We expected everything to be dangerous. We didn't know you would be peaceful. We didn't know you had never invented weapons. That's... Soto shook her head slowly. That's actually remarkable. In all our searching, we've never found a species like yours. And now that you know we are not dangerous? Elder Vorath asked. What will you do? We'll help you, Soto said. That's what we came to do. The asteroids will be destroyed. Your agricultural moon will be saved, and then we'll leave. We have no interest in conquering you or harming you. We wanted to help. The council was silent for a long moment. Then a younger member spoke up. But you could conquer us if you wanted to. Those ships above us could destroy our entire civilization in moments. Yes, Soto admitted. They could. Then why don't you? Soto looked at the young Velthri with sad eyes. Because that's not who we want to be. We've done terrible things in our history. We've hurt each other in ways I can barely describe. But we've also learned from those mistakes. We've built something better. Those ships up there, yes, they were designed for war. But they're also designed to protect, to rescue, to help. She leaned forward. We came here with an army because an army was what we had. But we didn't come here to make war. We came here because you asked for help, and we couldn't ignore that. It's not in our nature to ignore someone who's suffering. Meanwhile, in orbit, the engineering teams had begun their work. Commander Jack Russo led a team of specialists to the asteroid cluster, planting charges at calculated points throughout the debris field. He was a practical man who didn't care much for politics or first contacts. He had a job to do, and he intended to do it well. Chief Engineer Paul Vance coordinated the operation from the inevitable dawn, tracking each charge placement and running simulations. When Captain Lane asked her how long the operation would take, she shrugged. 3 days, maybe 4. Honestly, we're overstaffed for this. I could have done it with 1/10 of these people. The Admiral wanted to make an impression. Vance laughed bitterly. Oh, we made an impression all right. Did you see those poor creatures? They looked at our fleet like we were the apocalypse. Lane didn't respond. He had seen the sensor data from the planet's surface, the crowds fleeing, the children crying, the prayers being sent to gods who had never needed to hear them before. He had helped plan this operation, had felt proud of the overwhelming response humanity had mustered. Now he wasn't sure what to feel. Back on the surface, Dr. Soto was finishing her explanation. The council members had listened to everything, the wars, the weapons, the long bloody history of human civilization. They understood now, as much as they could, what humanity was and why it behaved as it did. Elder Vorath rose from his seat, his ancient limbs trembling. You are survivors, he said slowly. You have endured things we cannot imagine. And yet you came here to the edge of nowhere because strangers asked for help. Yes. Then perhaps... The elder paused, choosing his words carefully. Perhaps we have judged you too quickly. Perhaps we should learn more before we decide what you truly are. Soto felt a small spark of hope. I would like that, Elder. I think we have much to learn from each other. Outside the meeting hall, the empty streets waited in silence. But in a few windows, curious faces were beginning to appear again. Velthri, who were no longer hiding, no longer running, but watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Ambassador Keleth did not sleep that night. He sat alone in his chamber, thinking about everything Dr. Soto had told the council. The words played over and over in his mind. The wars, the weapons, the millions dead, the cities burned. He tried to imagine it, but his mind refused to cooperate. The concepts were too foreign, too strange. And yet these same creatures had crossed the stars to help strangers they had never met. When morning came, Keleth walked through the capital city. The streets were still quieter than usual, but people were beginning to emerge from their homes. Life was slowly returning to normal, or at least to something that looked like normal. The human fleet still hung in orbit, a constant reminder of the power above them. He found Dr. Soto at the landing area, speaking with a group of Velthri scientists who had overcome their fear enough to ask questions. She was patient with them, explaining human technology in simple terms, answering every question no matter how basic. Keleth watched her for a while before approaching. Dr. Soto, may I speak with you? Of course, Ambassador. They walked together through a garden at the edge of the city. The plants were strange to Soto's eyes, bright purple leaves and flowers that seemed to glow with inner light. The air was filled with a sweet scent she couldn't identify. I have been thinking all night, Keleth said, trying to understand your people. And have you succeeded? I don't know. He stopped beside a small fountain that trickled water the color of amber. You said you came here to help, that you couldn't ignore our suffering. But you also brought weapons. You came prepared to fight, even though we had given you no reason to expect to fight. That's true. So I must ask you a question. Dr. Soto, a question that has been troubling me since you arrived. Ask. Keleth turned to face her. His multifaceted eyes caught the morning light, fracturing it into 1,000 tiny reflections. What happens when you find someone who doesn't want your help? What happens when you encounter a species that is not peaceful, that does pose a threat to you? Soto was quiet for a long moment. She had expected this question eventually. It was the obvious one, the one that cut to the heart of what humanity really was. We defend ourselves, she said finally. We fight. And if we have to, we destroy. Have you done this before? Destroyed another species? No, not completely. But we have fought wars with other civilizations we've encountered. Small conflicts, mostly disputes over territory or resources. We've won some and lost some. We've made enemies and allies. And if you had found us to be hostile, if our distress signal had been a trap, designed to lure your ships into an ambush, Soto met his gaze steadily. Then we would have responded accordingly. Those ships above you are not just symbols, Ambassador. They are weapons. Real weapons, designed to kill and destroy. If you had threatened us, we would have used them. Keleth absorbed this. He had known the answer before he asked, but hearing it spoken aloud still sent a chill through his body. Your people live in constant readiness for war. We live in constant readiness for anything. War is just one possibility among many. That sounds exhausting. Soto laughed softly, a sound that surprised Keleth. It is. You have no idea how exhausting it is. Every generation hopes the next one won't have to carry the same burdens. And every generation ends up carrying them anyway. They continued walking through the garden. Above them, a flock of creatures that looked like birds but one flew across the purple sky. Keleth watched them for a moment before speaking again. I must address the High Council today. They want to know what I recommend, whether we should embrace your people or ask you to leave and never return. Many are still frightened. They believe your presence here will attract other dangerous species, will expose us to a universe of violence we never knew existed. What do you believe? Keleth stopped walking. He turned to look at the city behind them, the spires and domes of a civilization that had never known war, never needed walls or armies or weapons. His people had built this world through cooperation and kindness, through sharing and trust. They had never imagined that others might live differently. I believe, he said slowly, that the universe is larger than we knew, that it contains things we don't understand and perhaps never will. Your people are one of those things, a contradiction, a puzzle. You are capable of terrible destruction, yet you cross the stars to save strangers. You carry weapons, yet you use them to protect the helpless. He turned back to face Soto. Elder Vorith asked me a question yesterday, after you left. He asked what kind of galaxy you must have lived in to become what you are. I have been thinking about that question all night. And I think the answer is a dangerous one. A galaxy where kindness alone is not enough to survive. Where good intentions must be backed by strength, or they mean nothing at all. Soto nodded slowly. That's a fair summary, I think. Then perhaps that is what I will tell the council. That you are not monsters, but survivors. That your weapons are not threats, but shields. That when you look at us, you see not victims to conquer, but strangers to protect. Is that what you believe we see? Keleth tilted his head, a gesture that Soto had learned indicated deep thought. I believe you see something you have never encountered before. A species without weapons, without war, without the instinct for violence. I believe we confuse you as much as you confuse us. You're not wrong about that, Soto admitted. Then perhaps we should work to confuse each other less. Keleth reached out and touched Soto's hand gently, a gesture of trust among his people. You came here to help us. Let us help you in return. Let us show you that there are other ways to live, other ways to build a civilization. Perhaps we can learn from each other. Soto felt tears prick her eyes. In all her years of studying alien cultures, she had never encountered one quite like this. The Velthri had every reason to fear humanity, to reject them, to hide from the violence they represented. Instead, they were offering friendship. I would like that, she said. I think we would all like that. Later that day, Keleth stood before the High Council and delivered his recommendation. He spoke of what he had learned about humanity, their history, their fears, their strange combination of violence and compassion. He described a species that had been forged in fire and had somehow emerged with the desire to help others. They are dangerous, he concluded. More dangerous than anything we have ever known. But they pointed that danger at our asteroids, not at us. They came to save us, not to conquer us. And now they offer us something precious, a chance to learn, to grow, to understand a universe we never knew existed. Elder Vorith rose from his seat. And what of the risks? What of the enemies they might bring to our doorstep? Keleth faced the old elder steadily. The galaxy was always dangerous, Elder. We simply did not know it. Now we do. And we have a choice to hide from that danger alone, or to face it with allies who have learned how to survive it. The council voted that night. The decision was not unanimous, but it was clear. The Velthri would welcome humanity, not as conquerors or masters, but as friends. And in orbit above them, the fleet continued its quiet work, breaking apart the asteroids that had threatened to destroy everything the Velthri had built. The weapons remained cold and silent, pointing at nothing but empty space. For now, at least, they were not needed. For now, there was only help. Commander Jack Russo, watched from the observation deck of the engineering vessel as the charges detonated in perfect sequence. Massive rocks that had threatened an entire civilization shattered into pieces, and those pieces shattered into smaller pieces still. The debris would scatter harmlessly into deep space, never to threaten anyone again. "Clean work," said Chief Engineer Paula Vance, standing beside him. "Textbook operation. Should have been harder," Russo muttered. "Whole fleet for this. Felt like using a hammer to swat a fly. Maybe that was the point. Show them what we can do." Russo grunted. He had seen the reports from the surface, the fear, the panic, the misunderstanding. In his 30 years of service, he had helped evacuate colonies, rescued ships in distress, and supported a dozen humanitarian missions. This was the first time he had frightened the people he was trying to save. On the planet below, the Velfri watched the sky light up with distant explosions. They had been told what was happening, that the humans were destroying the asteroids, fulfilling the promise they had made. But seeing it was different from hearing about it. The power displayed in those explosions was beyond anything they had imagined possible. Ambassador Kelleth stood with Dr. Soto on a hillside outside the capital city, watching the show. Around them, thousands of Velfri had gathered, not in fear this time, but in wonder. Parents held their children up to see. Elders wept quietly. Young ones cheered with each flash of light. "It's beautiful," Kelleth said softly. "In a terrible way. Most human things are," Soto replied. "Beautiful and terrible at the same time. Is that what we will learn from you? To see beauty in destruction?" Soto considered the question carefully. "Maybe, or maybe you'll teach us to see destruction differently, as a last resort rather than a first instinct. We've spent so long being ready for war that we've forgotten what peace looks like." The last explosions faded. The sky grew dark again, filled only with stars and the distant lights of the human fleet. The agricultural moon hung low on the horizon, its surface unmarked, its future secure. A week later, Admiral Patricia Cole came to the surface. She descended in a shuttle far smaller than the one that had carried Dr. Soto. She wore her formal uniform, but she left her sidearm on the ship, a gesture that Kelleth noticed and appreciated. When she stepped onto Velfri soil, she was met by the full High Council, gathered in the garden where so many important conversations had taken place. "Admiral Cole," Kelleth said, bowing in the human fashion. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for receiving me, Ambassador." Cole's voice was different than it had been during their first communication. Softer somehow, more uncertain. "I wanted to speak with you before we depart. Of course." They walked together through the garden, away from the others. The Admiral moved stiffly, clearly uncomfortable in this peaceful setting. Kelleth noticed how her eyes constantly scanned her surroundings, looking for threats that weren't there. "I owe you an apology," Cole said finally. "When we received your signal, I should have asked more questions. I should have tried to understand what you actually needed, instead of assuming I knew. Instead, I brought a war fleet to the doorstep of a people who had never seen a weapon. You came to help us. We came to show off." Cole's voice was harsh with self-criticism. "We came to demonstrate human power, to make an impression on the galaxy. Your asteroid problem was just an excuse. If I'm honest with myself, we would have sent the same fleet regardless of what you actually needed." Kelleth considered this. "Perhaps, but the result is the same. The asteroids are gone. Our moon is safe. Our children will not starve. That doesn't excuse the fear we caused." "No," Kelleth agreed. "It does not. But fear can be overcome. Starvation cannot." He stopped beside the amber fountain and turned to face the Admiral. "Your people have a saying, I believe, about intentions and outcomes. The road to hell is paved with good intentions? I was thinking of a different one. Something about judging people by their actions, not their words." Cole was silent for a moment. Actions speak louder than words. Yes, that one. Kelleth reached into his robe and withdrew a small object, a sculpture carved from dark wood, polished to a smooth shine. It depicted two figures, one tall and angular, one small and round, standing together beneath a stylized sun. This is carved from a tree that has grown in this garden for 10,000 years. It is a symbol of partnership among my people. He held it out to the Admiral. Cole took the sculpture carefully, as if it might break. Ambassador, I don't... You came with an army, Kelleth said. You frightened us badly. And yet, when you understood your mistake, you sent Dr. Soto to explain. When you learned we were peaceful, you stayed peaceful. When your weapons were not needed, you kept them silent. He smiled, a strange expression on his insectoid face. I have learned something important about humans this past week, Admiral. You are not what you appear to be. What do we appear to be? Monsters, destroyers, the kind of creatures who burn worlds and slaughter the innocent. Kelleth shook his head slowly. But that is not what you are. You are guardians, protectors. You have simply been fighting for so long that you have forgotten what you are protecting. Cole stared at him. Her eyes were wet. Ambassador, take the sculpture, Admiral. Share it with your people. Tell them about the Velthri, about a species that asked for help and received an army, and who chose to see that army as a gift rather than a threat. He paused. And tell them that if they ever need us, we will be here. We have no weapons to offer, no ships to send. But we have wisdom and patience and a way of seeing the universe that you might find valuable. Cole held the sculpture against her chest. I don't know what to say. Say nothing. Just remember us. And perhaps, the next time you hear a call for help from the darkness, you will ask what kind of help is needed before you answer. The Admiral nodded slowly. I will, I promise. The fleet departed 3 days later. 147 ships rose from orbit in perfect formation, their weapons cold, their holds empty except for gifts from a grateful people. Admiral Cole watched the Velthri homeworld shrink in her view screen, the small blue-green world that had taught her something she had not expected to learn. In the years that followed, the story spread across the galaxy. Other species heard about the Velthri, the peaceful insectoids who had summoned a human, Armada, with a simple request for help. Some laughed at the misunderstanding. Some shuddered at the thought of human power. Some wondered what it meant for the future of the galaxy. But a few, the desperate ones, the endangered ones, the forgotten ones, heard the story and understood something different. They understood that somewhere in the vast darkness, there was a species that answered calls for help. A species that came with more than was needed, that prepared for the worst while hoping for the best, that had learned through fire and blood the importance of protecting the innocent. One by one, they began to send their own signals toward a small blue planet on the edge of the Orion Arm, and humanity answered. They always answered with everything. Sometimes that meant an army. Sometimes it meant a single ship. Sometimes it meant nothing more than a voice in the darkness, saying the words that the Velthri had first heard from Commander Daniel Hayes all those months ago. Message received. Assistance will be provided. Do not lose hope, because that was what humans did. They answered. They helped. They fought and protected and bled and died for strangers they had never met, simply because those strangers had asked. It was, Dr. Soto would later write in her memoirs, the most human thing of all to be terrible and wonderful at the same time, to be capable of destruction and creation in equal measure, to carry the weight of violence while reaching out with hands meant to help. The Velthri had asked for a hammer. They had received something far greater, the knowledge that they were not alone, and that in this vast, dangerous, beautiful universe, there were those who would come when called, no matter the cost, no matter the distance, no matter the danger. Humanity would always come.